Lyle. Thank you, praise team. Church, let me ask you a question that you're probably going to get asked a lot over the next couple days. How many of you made a New Year's resolution? Been raising me if you did. Yeah, all right. Now, just be honest. How many of you have already broken your New Year's resolution? Yeah, okay. Yeah. I get it. Yeah, it's a little tricky, isn't it? And that's the whole idea of this sermon series. Normally we think of all this stuff we have to do, and what I want us to really do is focus on a few things that we need to stop doing. You think about it, you come to a stop sign. It's there for a reason. It protects you. You stop. You look. Hopefully you look all four ways or more. Some places in Auburn there's like 6 roads that funnel into one, right? And you look, and maybe you keep going the same direction. Maybe you change your path. But the idea is you stop and you take a second and you look around. So that's what this is going to be all about, is things that we stop. These are not resolutions. These are spiritual challenges for you and I. So before we dive into that, I want you to think about some things that offend you. Right? Think about some things that are really offensive to you. I was thinking about that a little bit yesterday, right? When I was watching Ohio State's defense try to tackle. That was very offensive to me, right? It's like we are not playing two-hand touch. It is tackle, right? You got to tackle. It was very offensive. Over Christmas break, we took our family to go see the Spider-Man movie. And something that offends me is people that sit in a movie and talk to the people that are there, right? If you wanted to sit and talk, there's a lot cheaper options than at a movie theater. Or how about spoilers, right? Like, I had no idea that Spider-Man was actually from the Star Wars universe. Had no idea about that. And he was actually related to Chewbacca, and Iron Man's related to C-3PO. I had no idea any of that stuff. So spoilers are kind of offensive, right? How about this? People who don't use their turn signals. That drive anybody else crazy? Yeah, absolutely. And you better not have a Central Christian Church sticker on your car and neglect to use a turn signal, all right? How about people who are constantly interrupting your sentences, right? Like they're trying to guess what you're going to say, or maybe they're always trying to finish your sandwiches. You thought I was going to say sentence again, didn't you? Yeah, it's sandwich, right? Very offensive. How about standing too close? That's something that's always kind of bothered me, and then we had a global pandemic. You know what I mean? And I was like, it bothers me even more. That is about the only time that I miss my big stomach, because it was kind of a natural barrier. I lost about 200 pounds here over the last few years. And that stomach was good at kind of keeping people at bay. Now I just have to keep backing up. So there's a lot of things that are kind of offensive. And honestly, those things I just listed, those are kind of the easy things now, aren't they? Those we can kind of laugh about, we can have fun with, because it seems like in 2020, 2021, anger has started to evolve a little bit. People just seem more angry now than ever. They seem so much quicker to become angry now than they ever were before. We have all these hot button issues like vaccination, no vaccination, mask, no mask. Are we standing or kneeling? Who you voted for? We have all of these things that people are just so ready to argue and be offended by and fight over. It seems like there's this new level of intense hatred and anger and division and frustration that I don't know I've ever seen anything like it before in my lifetime. And as Christians, that's our calling, right? To be angry and divisive and intense and full of hatred, right? Okay. Now, little sarcasm there. Don't put that as an Instagram quote or something this week. But our role as Christians is to be a light, to shine into darkness, not to argue with darkness, not to be constantly offended by darkness, but to shine into it. Our role is to equip and encourage and point people to the love of Christ, that same love that drove him to the cross to die in our place. And to fulfill our mission, there are things that we are going to have to stop doing. I'm excited for this series. As each week we look at something to stop doing. Our challenge this week, which if you're taking notes, was an outline here. Our challenge, stop being so easily offended. Stop being so easily offended. If you don't think people are easily offended, Just literally right now, open up your phone to the web browser or Facebook, go to the comments section of a news article, any news article. It can be local puppy saves family from fire, right? Like, it's an awesome thing, right? And people are going to be like, well, why was there a fire? It must have been the electrician's fault. Where were the parents? You know, like, it's just like everybody's so quick to be offended. I don't care what it is. People are so ready to jump on stuff. I want you to look at James chapter 1, verse 19 with me. James 1, we're going to start with verse 19 here. James is saying, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone, okay, so that includes you and I, all of us, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Now, before we go any further, let's take a minute and just stop. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. How are you doing with this? How are you doing with that command right there? Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Oftentimes, we kind of have that flipped, don't we? We're quick to jump on someone's opinion. We stop listening as soon as we disagree with someone. In studying for this message, I found something really interesting. In the Gospels, Jesus is asked 183 questions. It's recorded in the four Gospels. He's asked 183 questions. Out of those 183 questions asked to him, how many did he directly answer? The answer is 3. 183 questions. He answered 3 questions directly. Now, I think of this. How many questions did Jesus ask? Recorded in the Gospels. He's asked 183. He answers 3. He asked 307 questions. And Jesus is often thought of as the one with all the answers. And he does have all the answers, and he's full of truth. But he was also this great questioner. He was also this person who was slow to speak, quick to listen, slow to become angry. He was the epitome of quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. And I tried to think, if Jesus asked all these great questions, what sort of question would he ask you and I? If he were sitting across from us, if he were here with us, what would he ask us? And so, especially in light of this series, I thought of this question relating to this verse. How effective is your anger? How effective is your anger? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like it changes people's minds, it brings people together. I win arguments on Facebook with my anger, right? And 1 being the opposite of that. Maybe you've lost friendships, family members. Maybe you've been blocked by it repeatedly on social media because of your anger. On a scale of 1 to 10, how effective is your anger? Not making you feel good, but at fulfilling the Great Commission. Think about it. I think honestly, if we approach it sincerely, the answer is we know our anger is not effective. Anger does not work. God's word tells us that as we continue in James 1, verse 20. He says, in 19, he says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. And then he says, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. It may produce righteousness, but not the kind of righteousness that God desires. And here's what's really strange, is I think some people enjoy being miserable. I think some people enjoy being angry. I think about it like we have like a youth group, we have D groups, we have life groups where people come together and they can pray and they can encourage one another and they can study the Bible. It's this really awesome time. I love being here on Tuesday mornings when the ladies' Bible study is having their study. I think they meet at like 9 or 10. But I love like hearing their laughter throughout this building, because normally I just hear ghosts. Right? Like, it's really creepy when you're here by yourself. And so I hear their laughter, and I'm just like, that is so cool. Like, this ladies' Bible study group, sitting down there laughing, studying the Word, praying together. And I think that, there's great power in that. And then I think there's also sometimes people who almost have anger groups, right? Like, those types of people that they get together, and they just kind of feed one another's anger instead of spiritually encouraging one another. They feed each other's gossip. They feed each other's frustration. And it doesn't make them more loving. It doesn't really make them more right. but it makes them feel more self-righteous. It produces a type of righteousness, but not the kind of righteousness that God desires. It's the kind that feeds our own pride and ego and flesh. Now, as I was kind of talking about this to a few people this week, I had a few people kind of push back. And they're like, what about righteous anger? Like, Andy, you talk about like drawing your heart close to God, and the things that excite God should excite yours. The thing that breaks God's heart should break your heart. The things that anger God should anger you, right? And so, it's like, what about righteous anger? After all, Jesus had an example of righteous anger in Scripture when he flipped the tables over. I think about it like this. Here's an observation, okay, that I've made about righteous anger. Usually, not always, so I don't want to generalize. I don't want you to feel like I'm attacking anybody or any person, but usually, righteous anger on our part is kind of a cop-out most times. All right? It's usually a facade to justify our own anger. Sure, there are things that I think produce a legit, genuine, righteous anger in our lives, but most times what I see is someone who's angry about someone else's sin, but they're never righteously angry about sin in their own life. Right? Like they have righteous anger about some sin, just not the sin that they're doing. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but it's really easy to feel righteous anger towards other things that are sinful while kind of justifying our own sin, our own anger. As Christians, it's really easy to sit back and criticize someone else's language, but ignore our own spiritual pride. As Christians, it's really easy to sit back and criticize someone else's sexual sin and ignore gluttony in our life. As Christians, it's really easy to criticize someone who we believe is gossiping, and yet when we do it, we're just praying for them, right? We just want people praying for them. I'm going to stop here for just a second, because there's a really good chance I might have offended somebody by this point, right? A really good chance I might have stepped on somebody's toes. This passage stepped all over my toes this week. So if I have offended you, take it up with God, because he offended me first, all right? So that's kind of the point, right? Now here's what I want to ask you now. If Jesus is again asking us questions to get us to stop, the question might be, do you want to make a point, or do you want to make a difference? I think this world is full of people who are ready to make points. You turn on any news channel and they're just waiting for their chance to interrupt the other person and make a point. So do you want to make a point, or do you want to make a difference? We're called to make a difference. We're called to be different from the world. It might feel good to give into anger, and sometimes, honestly, it does. To respond the way our flesh wants to. It's kind of like scratching a mosquito bite. Oddly enough, I have not had a mosquito bite in like 3 years. How, you ask? You want my secret? All you gotta do is get MS and take some drug, disease-modifying therapy that those mosquitoes even are like, you know what? I don't want any of that, right? But it's like getting that mosquito bite or poison ivy. You scratch it just a little bit and it kind of feels good first, doesn't it? It's kind of satisfying. And then pretty soon you have to keep scratching it and scratching and scratching until you're actually starting to kind of do damage. And it doesn't really feel good anymore. It's just something you feel compulsively you have to keep doing. Responding to anger, giving into anger, the way our flesh wants is just like that. So do we want to make a point, or do we want to make a difference in 2022? We're called to make a difference. I want to look at a scripture where Jesus did exactly that. In John chapter 8. John chapter 8, we're going to start with verse 1. John chapter 8, verse 1. It says, Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives, but early the next morning he was back again at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of the religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? But stop. They had a point, didn't they? She had sinned. They were angry. They were filled with this righteous anger, right? This morally superior anger that should have proven just how much better they are than this sinner. Can you believe that? This lady, she has committed adultery, and they're so angry about it, and they're angry about Jesus, and they think we can catch one or both of them. Now, a few things stick out in the story. First of all, where was the man? Right? It takes two people to have adultery, right? The man is not mentioned at all. Where are the witnesses? You know, there's supposed to be witnesses to this act, and maybe they were there, but there's this angry, self-righteous mob who wants Jesus to do something about this sin. Morally, they think they've got the high ground. They are offended. They are ready to pounce on him. Verse 6, it says they were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer. So he stood up again and said, "All right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. What did he write? Well, we don't know for sure. This is one of those things where I want to be very careful here. We can use some context clues. I think it's appropriate to look at tradition. The general idea is a lot of people believe he stooped down and began writing down the sins of all those who were present. In any case, whatever he wrote down, it stirred action. Not in the way they thought, but it stirred action. Whatever he wrote and what he told them stirred action. They were there to make a point. They wanted to make a point that Jesus was not the Messiah. They wanted to catch him. At the very least, they wanted to make a point and condemn this woman for adultery. Jesus was there to make a difference. Verse 9, let's continue on. It says, when the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more." They wanted to make a point. Morally, legally, they had pretty good grounds, didn't they? They were ready to make a point. The sexual sin that this lady participated in was wrong, and they wanted to make a point about it. But Jesus was there to make a difference. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. He didn't fall into that trap of just being totally offended or just trying to make a quick point. He was there to make a difference. Was Jesus stunned that that lady had sinned? Was he just like, "Oh my goodness, she did that? Are you kidding me?" Was he shocked and appalled that she had done that? No. In fact, he probably expected it. Was he outraged that sinners were sinning? No. I think he probably expected it. Was he shocked and appalled that the crowd had sinned and was sinning? No. I think he was probably a little heartbroken by it. I think he probably expected that in some capacity. Did he respond in anger to either of those people? No. What was his response? Grace. His response was grace. So how can we be more like Jesus in 2022? How can we stop being so easily offended? Show more grace. Show more grace. Lower your expectations for others. And that feels weird to say, doesn't it? Lower your expectations of others. As a football coach, I often preach the opposite. Like, we have high expectations, and we're increasing those expectations all the time. But in this type of situation, what we're talking about is lowering our expectations for what other people are capable of. And the sin in their life doesn't mean we just totally ignore all of it, but we show them grace, which is undeserved favor. It doesn't have to make sense. In fact, when you show grace, it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. But we're trying to make a difference. Think of, and I just talked about this story a couple weeks ago, but the woman at the well. She shows up, Jesus is there, they talk about sin, and this lady, has been married and divorced 5 times, and she's living with someone who's not even her husband, and they talk about sin, but in a graceful way. And as a result, Jesus extends grace to her, and the whole village believes because of her testimony. That's what I think is wild about grace, is we have no idea what showing grace can do to people. And sometimes I think we limit it so much what grace can actually do to our own understanding. People will let you down. It's okay to lower your expectations of them. Sinful people will do sinful things. It's very appropriate to show them grace. I'm not Jesus. You're not Jesus. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. Eventually, we're going to let people down. People will betray you. People will hurt you. People will lie to you. They're not going to show up when they say they're going to show up. They're going to not text you back. They're not going to laugh at your jokes. They're going to forget about your birthday. You know why? Because they're people. And they have shortcomings just like you and I do. I know that I've let people down. I'm sure that you have. Paul told us in the end times that people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money. They'll be boastful, they'll be proud, they'll be abusive, they'll be disobedient to their parents, they'll be ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, lacking self-control, brutal, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than God. And then we act shocked when sinful people do sinful things. I hate to tell you this, but if you were to follow me around for a few days, probably pretty quickly I would do something that let you down. I'm not perfect. If you were watching the Ohio State game with me yesterday, you might be saying, oh boy, all right, this guy's got some anger issues, right? And if you followed me around and listened to everything I said, every place I went, every thought I had, I know I would let you down. But promise me, when a Christian lets you down, that you won't say, God's not real. That Christian let me down, God's not real. You promise me that when a Christian lets you down, you won't say, well, the church betrayed you. The church didn't betray you. God is still real, and God loves you more than we have any idea. We need to be willing to show more grace to other people. Jesus was never shocked by people's self-centeredness. He knew their selfish, self-centered desires. He was never scandalized by their offensive behavior. If you read through the story, story after story, Jesus walks up to a woman at the well, married 5 times. He's not shocked and appalled or goes gossiping or running the other way. Instead, he offers her grace. Imagine if all Christians had the same approach to interacting with people living in sin. When the disciples are arguing about who is the best among them, posturing themselves, who's the favorite, it's highly annoying. I get frustrated reading it, but does Jesus lose it on them? Does he yell at them? Does he, no. He shows them grace by washing their feet. When Peter is bragging, hey, I will never let you down. I'm your dude. I've got your back. I'm the one guy that will never let you down. And then what happens? He lets him down. He stabs him in the back. In his moment of greatest need, he abandons him. Does Jesus go around complaining to everybody else, throwing him to the wolves to just be attacked and just totally giving up on him? No. He shows him grace, and in fact, he gives him a new assignment. Take care of my sheep. Feed my sheep. We will never be able to stop being easily offended unless we learn to show more grace. The second thing, we're going to stop being easily offended, is we need to start appreciating God's grace more. Appreciate God's grace more. Lower your expectations of others by extending more grace. You'll never regret that. And then appreciate God's grace even more. Well, one of my favorite things every year is usually about the second week of July. We go to South Carolina. We go to Myrtle Beach. I'd never been there until about 4 or 5 years ago, and it is one of my favorite places to go. It's so relaxing and peaceful, and there is something about the ocean and hearing the ocean and the warm sun and the gentle breeze that just is so peaceful. I love going there and just taking that all in. And there's something about the ocean air and the sunsets there, right? It's the most beautiful sunsets you've ever seen. The sunrises are probably great. I'm not much of a sunrise guy, all right, if you know what I mean. I love sunsets, though. And there are many evenings where we'll walk down to Barefoot Lane, we'll stand out on our patio or whatever, and we'll just stare in awe at the sunset and the colors and just stand there and just really appreciate it and just take it in. In fact, some of my favorite pictures that we have of us as a family are these selfies that we've taken with the Myrtle Beach sunset in the background. It's like I want to always be able to remember that and think of how beautiful God's creation is. Sometimes I think we need to have that approach with grace. Right? There's a line in a song that we sing that says, if grace is an ocean, we're all sinking. It's overwhelming, His grace. It is awe-inspiring. And I think sometimes we just kind of get really dismissive of it. So let me ask you a question. And guys, this is only going to work if everybody plays along. If you guys don't do this, what's going to happen is there will be people here today that will never come back. All right? So you don't have to lie, but you got to be honest and you got to participate. All right? I will give everybody a participation high five on the way out if you participate. All right? If you don't participate, hey, take that up with God. All right? So you've got to do it because otherwise we're going to really offend somebody in a probably pretty serious way. All right, so raise your hand if you have ever sinned and leave it up. Raise your hand if you've ever sinned. Okay, all right. Not bad. Good. All right, and now keep it up for just a second. All right, so the only people who should have their hand out, and just take a second and look around all these sinners. All right? Just look around all these sinners. Everybody in here. You know, look at the people out back. They don't have their hands up. You know what I mean? Like, we'll talk with them. All right, a little counseling here. Right? And keep your hands up for just a second if you can. All right, if you need to till and do that, you can do that. All right, the only reason your hand should be down is if you've never sinned. You've never gossiped. You've never lied. You've never stolen. You've never farted on an elevator and then quickly got off when it stopped suddenly. You didn't know it. I don't know if that's a sin, but doesn't that feel like a sin? You know what I mean? Right? We are all sinners. Take a second, one last time, and just look around. Everybody. We are all, you can put your hands down now, you sinners, all right? We're all sinners in need of a Savior. We've all sinned and fallen short of God's glory. Every single one of us has. How is it that we're made right with God? Paul tells us, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 and verse 9. Here's how you're made right with God. For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith. And this is not from yourselves, it is a gift from God, not by works so that no one can boast. It's not that we're good, it's not that we're smart, it's not that we have money, it's not that we're better than other sinners. What is it? It's grace. It's undeserved favor. I don't deserve it, I can't earn it. All I can do is accept His grace. It's the goodness of God who died on the cross because of His perfection, His righteousness, His actions, that I can have grace. And you might say, but hey, Andy, you don't know the people. They've lied about me. Well, I've lied too. Chances are you have too. But you don't know these people are arrogant. I can be arrogant too. But they stole from me. I've stolen. I'm sure you've stolen too. I'm going to stop listing my sins in front of you guys now, but you get the point, right? The people around us need the grace of God, just like I need the grace of God.